Hello everybody, I am Busy Rich and welcome to my very first miniature painting. I've just completed this workspace. Actually, I just cleaned it up. I put it together a couple weeks ago and I just recently cleaned it up and kind of filled it with everything. Get used to the crappy lighting and stuff like that because I am still working on all of that. So it's probably not going to be the most professional, high quality video, but the video itself will be okay. The lighting and stuff like that I'm still working on it. But I have paints, I have a little work area, I have lots of different things going on here. I've already kind of played around with a few things, but it should be a lot of fun. And it should be something that the more I do, the better I get at it right now. I don't really consider myself an artist or a designer or anything like that. And I don't really play miniatures all that much, but I used to play Mage Knight years ago. I used to mess around with, stuff like that. But I've recently had a hankering to go back and try something different. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 Heroclix. I got these mostly off of eBay, just less than $1 a piece kind of thing, just big lots of them. And I'm going to try to mash a whole bunch of them together. So I picked out 4. And I'm going to mash a bunch of them. I'm going to mash those 4 together into a different new character. So then I'm going to paint it and come up with a persona for it. So without further ado, I'll stop rambling. Let's just get down to brass tacks and go have some fun, all right? So these are the 4 I picked out to kind of hobble together into one unique piece. I did have some video of me like kind of planning out what to go where and how to cut up things and stuff like that. But you know what? It ended up that I didn't actually go through with that plan anyway. And it seemed like making a plan ahead of time like that always goes wrong. I may be able to do that when I kind of do this more and kind of understand what I can do and what I can't do. But this is the first time I've ever done this. So I kind of was just like, yeah, that works. And it didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. So I'm just going to scrap that, move on. There is one thing about the recording that you should know, and that's that this angle, this overhead angle, works really great when you only see my hands, but when I'm trying to work on things, I get really close, and all you really get are immaculate shots of the top of my head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 15 seconds and roll through everything that I did here and give you some music and show you the end result. So let's go. Ta-da! So he has the head of somebody, an arm from someone, legs from someone else, boots from someone else, he has a sleeve from someone, and an arm from someone. So, and he has the body of Robin. Poor Robin. he turned into a nugget before the end of it. So now we have to go ahead and do some painting and get him, better than hobbled together, looking hobbled together. Okay, so here's the problem. I started looking at my paints back here, and none of them, most of them are not usable at all. Some of them are still kind of wet and stuff like that, but these right here are years old, like 6-7 years old. I got them back when I was messing around with miniatures. I used them maybe once or twice, and then I never used them again. So they're mostly all dried out. The inks are still good, but I don't even want to get started with ink. Ink's probably a couple of figurines away before I start even thinking about how that works. So what I'm going to do is I've actually went to the local Michaels. I didn't order this online because I figured the Michaels had some, like, paint is something they have a lot of. So I went down and I actually found this. I got this for $8. Not a piece, like this whole thing was $8. So it's just really cheap acrylic paint. I've been reading up on how people do this, how they go about repainting Heroclix, how they go about painting miniatures and stuff like that. And I found a really interesting article from like years ago, and the guy basically said, "Yeah, I go down to Walmart and I buy like the cheapest acrylic paint they have, and it's worked great." So I got the cheapest, not the cheapest, but I got pretty darn cheap. Maybe it is the cheapest, but I also like that they're in the little containers because I'm not going to use very much of each paint, right? So it's not like I'm painting a giant painting or anything like that. I'm just painting miniatures. So I got this, and so I got a couple of other things that I'm going to reveal later. But let's go ahead and get started with this and see what happens. The plan is to first kind of try a few things on some miniatures, some of the leftovers that I've had from some of the other things I've been doing. So we're first going to go through the process of kind of like trying some things and seeing how it works, and expect lots of different camera angles still because I'm still working out the best camera angle. But anyway, I digress. Let's get down to it and have some fun. So the first thing I wanted to try out was some priming and base coating techniques. I've read several things online, and most of what I've read says you don't really have to primer these, and you don't have to base coat these. Some people base coat them, some people primer them. Very few people actually primer them, but some people base coat them, and a lot of people just paint right over them. It seems like you can just paint right over these Heroclix, little miniatures, just fine. But I wasn't really convinced of that, so I tried a couple of things out. I got some really fine primer online, and I wasn't necessarily impressed with the results of that. It was really hard to get in all the nooks and crannies and stuff like that. The second option I had was something called gesso. Now, gesso is apparently just a really thick kind of primer base coaty kind of thing, and you just kind of slather it on and paint it on, and it gives you a really good starting point. Now, eventually, I tried a bunch of different base coats and gesso base coat and stuff like that. I tried a lot of things on poor Hulk there because he was my test dummy, and he had a lot of surface area to paint. So, but what I found out is that for some reason, mixing the white with the black of the paint I got gave me a really, really good base coat that stuck, and I didn't have to paint it like several layers in order for it to cover everything up. It just basically covered up the previous paint. I don't know why that is. I suspect that it has something to do with the watered down nature of some of these paints that I was using, because they are cheap paints, so they're kind of watered down. They definitely have a cheap feel to them, but they work. And for whatever reason, like any shade of gray seemed to be great. So I could use light gray all the way down to like a really dark gray. And that means I can have a really dark or really light base coat. The white by itself didn't really adhere, and the black by itself looked really, really bad. It looked like I would never be able to paint over it. So that's as far as base coating goes. So I spent the next couple of hours just painting over everything I could find to try out different techniques, make sure I know what's going on. I definitely found out that I am very impatient, and if I try to paint things too early, like a second layer perhaps, that the first layer ends up kind of washing off because they are water-based acrylic paints, and they are very watery. So again, kind of doing this to myself, buying cheap paints, but that's okay. I'd rather do cheap paints, see how I do for a couple, and then move on to more advanced things. But overall, it went pretty good. Poor Hulk kind of took a big hit as far as different paints, so I kind of painted him all kinds of different colors, but overall it went pretty well. Then it was time to test something else out. So the one thing you can't get on the cheap is metallic and special paints, so like sparkly paints. But I had this idea of using this stuff called mica powder and also just plain glitter. But this mica powder is apparently something you can mix with acrylic paints to give it kind of a metallic look. So obviously I wanted to test this before I just like slapped it on any actual thing I do. So first of all, glitter and mica powder, it gets everywhere and it's very hard to get off, especially mica powder. So if you're ever going to use this yourself, keep that in mind. Also, I have different colors, which is awesome. But the first thing I wanted to do was kind of shuffle this into its own kind of cases, then mix it and try it out. So I'm only going to use I've only used two different ones in this case. I used the white of both the glitter and the mica powder because I thought that would be the most universal. Like I could use either in any sort of color. These other colors I'd have to use in similar colors, right? So red glitter goes in red paint. Pink mica powder goes into pink or red paint. So it's going to be hard to use those without kind of changing the color. So I figured a silvery kind of whitish color would work for both. So I went ahead and I tested this out on the Hulk because, again, we have to use the Hulk to test paints. Why not? So it ended up pretty good. I'm not sure if pink was the greatest color to test with these, but it turned out pretty hilarious, and the Hulk is going to be more pretty for his beauty pageant. But I think this is going to work for when I need to use it. But the trick is I found out that I probably did not use enough, so I may have to kind of overload with glitter or mica powder when I actually use it in practice. So I need to keep that in mind. So this ended up as a good experiment. I think this is actually going to work for really cool effects in the paints in the future. So after all that experimentation, the first step in actual preparing the new figure is to mount it on a little base and then primer it. So I mixed up a dark-ish gray, kind of a, yeah, I guess it's a dark gray, because I figured this character was going to be a little bit darker in color, but I found out through the painting itself that you really are just going to paint over it. So the primer really helps me kind of see the figure for what it is, though, because a lot of these are going to be hobbled together like this. I plan on doing them all kind of in this manner of pasting multiple parts together. I had a lot of fun doing that, but the primering step allows me to see it as a piece instead of a bunch of super glued together parts from different things. So so the primering didn't take long at all. It took maybe 20 minutes to do the primering, and then I had to wait for it to dry before I could do anything else. So next was painting. The painting took several hours to do, as you can imagine, and it was a lot of fun, but for speed's sake, the video is getting on a while now, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you a montage over like 15-20 seconds or something. So again, it was really fun. I think I did the colors on the fly. But anyway, here's your montage. So now that the painting is done, the next step is clear coating or sealing. whichever you want to call it. Now, for this, I'm going to use something called Mod Podge, which I have in 3 flavors. I have matte, gloss, and super gloss. But I'm going to use just the plain old gloss. You basically just paint it on, and it seals it. And it looks actually really great. The gloss looks pretty great. I like the matte more than the gloss, but for minifigs, it's probably going to be gloss or super gloss. I found out about this through my wife, who uses this for puzzles. So apparently this is really popular in puzzling, where you paint this on and it sticks the puzzle together, so it acts as kind of like a glue and seals it at the same time. So she has lots of different puzzles that she's used this on, and so I bought this a long time ago for something else, but I think this is going to work really great. So let me just give you a quick montage of the sealing, and then we'll just go from there. The year is 1865. Dylan has married and is settling down in the southwestern frontier. One hot, sunny afternoon, the two were out for a picnic in the cactus fields. It was then he was bitten by a roadrunner, gaining the power of ultra speed. He now roams the west with his faithful lady, working as a gun for hire. I give you Dylan McSwift!